everyone. This is Teresa Kemker. I'm chair of the St. Paul Heritage Preservation Commission, and welcome to our July 26, 2021 meeting. The Heritage Preservation Commission reviews applications for projects at heritage sites or within the heritage districts in the city of St. Paul, and it also serves as an advisory body to the mayor and the city council on municipal heritage preservation matters for the city. All documentation utilized for this meeting is available on the Commission website at www.stpaul.gov/HPC, and no new documentation will be discussed or recognized at today's meeting. Notice of this meeting was posted in the Legal Ledger and sent to the St. Paul Citywide Early Notification System, or ENS. To sign up for ENS, please visit the city website at www.stpaul.gov. And if you have questions about notice, please contact the HPC staff. During the meeting, please mute your microphones except when recognized by the chair to speak. You can unmute from your computer by pressing the microphone button or from your phone by pressing *6. After being recognized by the chair, commissioners and staff will need to state their names before speaking, and everyone else needs to state their name and address before speaking. All deliberation and voting will be done via a roll call conducted by the chair, and staff will be monitoring microphones and muting participants as needed. So with that, I will take a roll call of our commissioners. Commissioner George, are you with us tonight? Yeah, Commissioner Bazat, you're here.
Present.
Commissioner Douglas. Commissioner Lubke. Commissioner McDonald.
Here.
Commissioner Nelson is here.
I'm here.
Commissioner Peroka.
Here.
Hello, Joe.
Here.
Commissioner Wagner. Okay, let me try Commissioner George. Commissioner Douglas. Commissioner Lubke. Commissioner Wagner. Okay. Then are there any conflicts of interest today among the commissioners? Hearing none. Our first order of business skipped over adoption of the agenda. I apologize. We have an agenda. Do I have a motion and second for adoption of the agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Bazat.
This is Nelson, second.
Thank you, Commissioner Nelson. Any opposition to the motion to adopt the agenda? Hearing none, then the agenda is adopted. And then our first item of business is approval of the minutes. First, for the June 28, 21 Education and Outreach meeting. Those minutes were posted, and well, maybe we can just do both of them at the same time. July and the minutes for our meeting last time, the July 12th, 2021 HPC meeting. Both of those were posted on the website and made available to the commissioners for their review. And assuming that if they're true and correct, do I have a motion for approval of those minutes in a second?
I move approval of both sets of minutes. This is Commissioner Bazat.
Thank you.
This is Nelson, I second.
Thank you. Any opposition to that motion? Hearing none, those minutes are approved. First item of business for today is our only item of business for today is the CLG comments on the Gold Bus Line Rapid Transit proposed station designs. And I assume, are you presenting on that, Commissioner George?
Yes, I am. So as part of the certified local government contract the HPC has with the state, we can comment on potential effects of a federally funded project on historic resources, and we also can allow for public comment. The HPC does not take any approval or denial action, but we will compile the comments on possible effects or project suggestions and pass those along. We may also make a motion based on if we concur with the findings. The Federal Transit Administration, in cooperation with Metro Transit and the Metropolitan Council, is proposing the Gold Line Bus Rapid Transit Project. That is a proposed 10-mile bus transit route with stations between Union Depot and St. Paul and downtown Woodbury. The dedicated bus rapid transit, or BRT, is often considered the transit technology that will most be like a light rail transit system. Dedicated BRT includes a package of transit enhancements that deliver fast, comfortable, cost-effective services using special roadways or lanes dedicated to the exclusive use of buses. The Heritage Preservation Commission reviewed the assessment of effects of the proposed station locations, and the HPC concurred with the assessment of no adverse effect with updated conditions at the February 2021 meeting. The HPC requested that the proposed shelter platform design return to the HPC for comment. Shelters will be metal frame with glass. Signage and departure arrival displays will be a standard design common to public transportation found elsewhere in St. Paul. Other amenities such as ticket machines, bicycle racks, etc. will be located on the platform or nearby. The shelter platform will be predominantly open and will be located entirely within the public right-of-way. Sidewalk width will be maintained around the shelter or platform. The shelter platform design should have little or no effect on historic resources. And it's not unusual that we see street amenities such as a bus shelter in the public right-of-way in an historic district. Some views could be affected. However, the platform shelters, they're primarily transparent, and it's a necessary component of life in the city. There are also minor alterations. If there are minor alterations to the plans between the 60% plans and the 100% plans, we'd ask that the commission delegate staff the ability to comment, and in any major issues that arise, we would bring it back to the HPC for comment. Are there any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Goss from the commissioners? Let me just run through the roll and see. Commissioner Bazat?
Not at this time.
Thank you. Commissioner McDonald?
No questions at the moment.
Thank you. Commissioner Nelson?
Just this, to me, maybe the most important thing you said, George, is that these are standard design, and I gather that they're all virtually identical to one another and to similar shelters all around the MTC system. Am I right?
Well, these are actually, and I can let the applicants talk more to this, but these seem to be a little bit more open and transparent than the shelters we see on the A line, which have more color and design to them, which I appreciated the openness that, I mean, we have to have bus shelters and platforms like this. And this isn't these areas are part of a historic district. So to make them as minimal as possible should fit in. So, I mean, they're similar to what we see elsewhere. And there is some branding that Metro Transit wants to do to make sure folks know what these are and why they're used. But I think they did go a little extra design with making these more transparent. So.
Yeah, that's helpful. It struck me in looking at all these that an entirely different approach to them might have been to have the shelters make some design reference to where they were placed. That wasn't done, and I can see why. But what you said about them being more transparent is very helpful. So thank you.
Commissioner Bazat, did you have a question?
I suppose it's a type of question. I was thinking of saving it for the applicants, but I would like to concur with one of the statements that Commissioner Nelson made in terms of there being no reference to the sites where they're located within the downtown area, simply because in looking at the proposed locations, they're surrounded by quite large historic brick buildings. And when I think of, I know that the A-line shelters, I'm near or drive by quite a few of the A-line shelters have no public art nor reference to their location, but within the downtown area, particularly Lower Town, I think that it would be more appropriate to have some sort of either a semi-transparent panel reflecting some of the architecture of the historic district.
I'm sorry, Commissioner, is this a question for staff or?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. So is there such a thing as visual impact? I recognize there is no structural impact on the locations, but is there a visual impact comment that makes sense, or is that something we can just comment at the end and ask that that be included in our more formal comment?
You can give feedback to the team that if you feel like there should be public art, or this should look different, or it has too much of an impact on structures.
Okay.
Once again, we should be very clear on how we think that it has that impact.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Exactly. I have been thinking about them since I saw the designs, and I just wanted to know if that was at all appropriate, if Barb is like outside the ballpark right now. And that was Commissioner Bazat, Barb, not one of the applicants.
Thank you. Any other questions for staff?
Okay. I believe we skipped Commissioner Peroka.
Oh, right. Commissioner Peroka, do you have any questions for staff?
I have no questions for staff. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Well, with that, thank you, George, and we'll move to the applicant. I know we have quite a few people here to present on this application. So I don't know who wants to start off there.
Thanks. Hi, this is Chelsea Johnson. I am with Metro Transit, and I'm the environmental lead for the Gold Line project. And today we will be presenting sort of a Section 106 recap. Kristen Schumler and Barbara Howard were key to developing the assessment of effects for design at 60%. So they will be presenting the information and results of that study, and it does include some elements of our station design at 60%. So we'll get a little bit to that question you were asking about visual impact. So with that, I will turn it over to Kristen. Thanks.
Good afternoon. As Chelsea said, my name is Kristen Schumler, and I'm a senior cultural resource specialist with the consulting firm Mead and Hunt. Located here in Minneapolis. We have been hired recently by the Minnesota Department of Transportation's Cultural Resource Unit to help do some of the finishing steps on the Section 106 process for this project. So I will be sharing my screen, and if somebody could just confirm that you're seeing the full presentation and not the note slide, I would appreciate that.
Music is fine.
Yep. All right, can everyone see? Sorry, technology is being a little slow. Is anyone seeing the full presentation?
Yes.
We're also seeing the
your screen.
Your full screen on the left side, it contains each of the individual slides. You can close that. Well,
Okay.
hello,
My apologies.
Commissioner Nelson.
I don't know what all that is.
Yeah, I apologize. Try this
There.
one more time. Okay.
There it is.
Success.
Yay,
Thank
thanks.
Thank you all for your patience with that. It's not a Zoom meeting unless there's some technological glitch. So today we're going to just go over the Section 106 recap for this project. And the purpose of this meeting is to update the HPC on the assessment of effects for historic properties in St. Paul. So this is based on the project's 60% design plans. And then we'll also discuss some of the next steps for the continuation and completion of the Section 106 process. So to recap what has occurred to date, and to give a little bit more background, so the Section 106 process is a federal process by which a federal agency funding or permitting a project has to take into account that project's effects to historic properties. And a historic property within the federal system is any property that is determined eligible for or formally listed on the National Register of Historic Places. So for the Gold Line project, the Federal Transit Administration is the lead federal agency. They are the ones responsible to make sure Section 106 is complied with. So the 106 process, as you know, requires identification and evaluation of properties to figure out which ones do meet that National Register criteria. And then once we know which ones are historic, to look at what is the project proposing, and then is that going to result in an effect to that historic property, or is there an adverse effect, or is there a change, but it's not enough to rise to the level of being an adverse effect. So consultation is a key process in the Section 106 review. It's through consultation with HPC and others that we can really take into consideration any other opinions, things we may have missed. So that's what we're hoping to do today. We have throughout the process been engaged step by step with the SHPO. We've come to HPC before, and then there's other parties that have been involved throughout. So back in November of 2020, that's when sort of the first assessment of effects was issued. This was based on the project's 30% plans. So there was a good amount of detail, but there were, some things that were missing in those plans. There was enough to know it appears there's not going to be any adverse effects to the identified historic properties, but there were conditions placed on that. This project was brought to the HPC back in February of 2021, and we received comments from the consulting parties by March of this year, sorry. So right now, since that previous consultation, the Gold Line Project Office, MnDOT-CRU, FTA, and then myself as a consultant have been looking at what has changed between the 30% plans and the 60% to see if any of the conditions that were placed at 30% have been addressed, or if there's any changes in what's being proposed that would make us have to go back and survey for more properties, or it would change those previous effects findings. So we, again, on behalf of FTA, provided that analysis, and FTA accepted the recommendation from us that the project is based on the 60% plan continued with this no adverse effect finding, but there are still some continuing conditions. So that was issued in June of this year, June 2nd, I believe. And we would like to receive comments from consulting parties, including the HPC, by August 2nd. And there is a link in this presentation to that finding. And do feel free to ask questions as we're going. So as I mentioned, over the last several months, we've been looking at the 60% plans, and what we're looking for is substantive changes, and then if there's enough detail to address the conditions that were placed previously. So substantive changes would be things that are major enough that it would change the area within which we need to survey for historic properties, because the effects may have changed, or like I mentioned, some detail in the design has led us to say this actually could be an adverse effect. So we reviewed for that, and then the presentation today is really highlighting what we have found. So the properties within St. Paul that received an updated finding based on the 60% plan are listed here: Johnson Parkway, the Texas Company Service Station, Lowertown Urban Renewal, and Rice Park Historic Districts. And then we also have Pioneer Endicott Arcade Edition, the Manhattan Building, Landmark Center, and Hams Building. So we're going to go through those and highlight. Here's just a map showing the location of those properties with revised findings based on the 60% plan. So the Johnson Parkway, this is eligible for the purposes of 106. You can see it outlined in purple. That is the boundaries. The project will be adding a bridge and doing some other associated roadway work. At the 30% plan, we said that it appeared the project would not adversely affect Johnson Parkway because it was adding this bridge in an area that has some compromised integrity already, and this is a long linear district. So these changes were considered to be no adverse effect, but we did want to, double check that at the 60% design page just to make sure what we were seeing at 30, held true. We did get some more design detail that showed a bridge that really mimics the existing interstate bridge. And because of that, even though there is more infrastructure being added, it really blends in with the existing infrastructure. And therefore, we determined it meets the historic standards. And it was through this review that we are now, and FTA has found that the conditions from the 30% are no longer necessary. Another property was the Texas Company Service Station, which is located at this intersection of Hudson and Plum and Bates. This is the property boundaries here in purple. There was, again, a finding at 30% of no adverse effect with updated or, with conditions, which was basically making sure that, the construction activities, they're not going to be right up next to the building, but just that work was occurring around there, and to make sure that everything would be, done to protect the resource, and also just to check the plans at that stage. Based on our review of the 60% plan, here we can see the Texaco service station outline. There is going to be a change in the setting to this station because this intersection, which used to connect through, is being modified. But again, when looking at the levels of what would be an adverse effect to it, really diminishing the qualities that characterize this building's architecture and design and type, it felt like, yes, there's a change, but it's not enough to rise to that level of being adversely affected. So again, the finding of no adverse effect with the condition that there are going to be specific details in the construction plans and specifications, so the contractor knows that they are working adjacent to a historic property and that they are, there are certain measures that need to be taken to help ensure that the property is not affected. Again, it is set back quite a ways, but there will be that in the plans and specifications to help in its consideration. And again, feel free to ask questions as I go through this. So for Sibling Makuta Station area, this is located within the Lowertown Historic District. And for the purposes of Section 106, the historic property that we are looking at if it's being affected, is that entire Lowertown Historic District. It is a large district that encompasses many, as was mentioned earlier, large brick warehouse and other properties. And there are a number of contributing buildings that contribute to that historic district, but again, the effects are to the district as a whole. So there are 2 shelters that are being placed in this area. You can see the yellow stars for where they will be. This one over on Makuta is not really adjacent to any contributing properties within the historic district, but the station at Sibling and 4th is right next to the Samco building, which is a contributing property to the district, and there are other contributing properties in the area. So again, at 30%, there was a finding in no adverse effects, but that we needed to, review certain considerations at the 60% plan stage. So here we're showing the shelter types that is being proposed for these locations. This is shelter type 1, which would be used at both these locations. This is the second to the smallest shelter size that's being used on the project. And as George mentioned earlier, there's a balance of trying to be thoughtful to the location and the adjacent historic properties, but also branding the shelters so that people don't get confused and end up going to the wrong shelter if they want the BRT service on this line. So there are certain design elements that carry through all the designs so that they can have that brand identity, but they also have been adjusted to some extent for each location. Most of that is being done through the size of the shelter and through the amenities included on, the platforms and that. So here, because it is within the Lowertown Historic District and because it is, on that sidewalk next to the Samco building, the tilt of the shelter has been made more upright. Some of the other shelters have a little bit more of a tilt to them. So this was done just to, again, create more space behind them so that there was more sidewalk space in the district, can keep that rectangular grid of the Lowertown Historic District. But it still has sort of the same characteristics that says this is part of the Gold Line project. And as George was also mentioning, using things like clear glass, eliminating some of the elements of the shelter so that it is more transparent. That is a way to minimize effects to any historic properties. This is just the floor plan for that. And again, there was a lot of work with this location to just keep it as far away from the building as possible and really to minimize the design elements. Here you see, yes.
This is Commissioner Nelson. Maybe now is the time to ask, is there a space, a flexibility here, for example, to at least say identify that this is in a historic district? Maybe the creation of these shelters in historic districts is an opportunity to do something which, to my way of thinking, we barely do in this city, which is remind people that there are historic districts and what their dimensions are and what's in them. So is there space for a sign, a plaque, a marker of some sort in this shelter or any others?
Thank you, Commissioner Nelson. Chelsea, would you want to answer this?
Well, I was either going to offer out maybe Liz Jones, our outreach coordinator, as well from that perspective. But I think a small item as part of the shelter, recognizing they're calling out the historic area, could be a detail worked on by the project team here. Just didn't know how significant this would go, and I know there's have been detailed discussion on public art. I think as long as it doesn't encroach on those lines, knowing that our federal dollars don't cover public art. So if anything else you want to add, Liz, please chime in.
Sure. Thanks, Chelsea. Hi, everybody. This is Liz Jones. I am the outreach lead for the Goldline Project, like Chelsea mentioned, and she pretty much covered it. We've certainly heard some comments wanting public art, as well as maybe some more wayfinding or signage as it pertains to the local community. And so we would look at some of our project partners at the cities and counties and potentially other private entities to work with in that regard, since we cannot pay for items like public art through the project itself. But it's definitely conversations we're having with our project partners and stakeholders and accommodating kind of space for what future public art or additional signage and things like that might look like.
So this is Nelson again, just to clarify, I'm not necessarily thinking of public art. So, okay, public art is out so far as federal money is concerned, but is informational signage possibly in, or does separate money have to be found for that?
I think it would be further conversation. It would definitely be more of a collaborative effort between Metro Transit and potentially the city or local entities. But it's certainly different than public art, like you mentioned, but not necessarily the standard kind of directional signage that would come with the project. I see our project director, Chris Beckwith, hopped on. Chris, do you have any other comments about kind of personalized community signs, specifically in downtown, for this question here?
So personalized community signs. I wish I could see an example of what you're talking about.
Well, I'm just making it up as we go along.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
to repeat myself a little bit, we have historic districts in St. Paul. They are very rarely marked. So the public, I would venture to say, has almost no idea that there is any such thing as a lower town historic district. This perhaps is an opportunity to increase public awareness a little bit.
Okay, yeah, I see what you're saying. So, and are you suggesting that those signs would be on the platform or near the station, or just kind of along the alignment downtown, or to be determined?
Well, since we're talking about the platforms and the shelters, I would say on the platforms and shelters.
Okay.
There's a lot of wall space going to be created there. Most of it I see is going to be transparent, but I don't think all of it has to be transparent.
So I think, yeah, if we want to have a conversation with, if there was a signage project across the Lower Town Historic District, and not just a platform, then people might think it's just the platform that is historic. But if there's plans to maybe sign a larger extent of that, we would definitely participate in this discussion.
Okay, well, maybe later we'll just attempt to add to the motion an exhortation that the conversation begin. That's all.
I have shared and applicants. I have a very quick question about this composition of the structure. Will there be elements under the roof of these shelters? Yes, where you're pointing.
I apologize. I'm getting feedback.
Yeah, you're breaking up too, Kristen.
If anyone is not speaking, could you go on mute? I don't know if that will help. The question I heard was, is there going to be anything under the the shelter, do you mean in this area here?
Exactly.
Okay. You know, there will be some sort of, you know, finish that will go in there that is being developed between the 60 and the 90% plans as to what exactly those finishes will be. I mean, it'll just be some sort of and Chelsea or someone else, feel free to jump in. It'll just be some sort of consistent finish that is in there, but nothing that really stands out or is too overwhelming. I think that it's a lot of natural sort of shades that are being proposed.
And mostly the question was regarding whether or not there are any mechanical, you know, such as heating elements that would have to be left open. You know, I don't even know if it's been a long time since I've been able to wait in a shelter. Usually my bus stops are out in the open with a breeze blowing. But I know when I was commuting to the university, a lot of the plain old bus shelters had heat lamps, and even don't the LRT stops have heat lamps under on the people roof inside of those shelters? Oh, I see Michael Yishki's hand is up.
Hi, good afternoon. Yeah, this is Michael Jiski with the Gold Line Project Office, and I can take a crack at answering that question. Yes, there are radiant heaters that would be hung from the interior of the shelter ceiling.
All right, thanks.
There's also a variable message sign, which is that rectangular feature that is shown on the slide currently.
Yeah.
And I think you can see the heaters in a kind of schematic location too. They're tucked up near the ceiling there.
So they're more vertical rather than plastered to the actual ceiling of the shelter. Thank you. I was just thinking in terms of locations for informational, you know, the historic district type of information. Thank you. That answers my question as to what's on those ceilings. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you. So I think I was on this slide. This just basically shows, you know, where there will be some pavement removal to build the new shelter. There originally was a plan for a snow melt feature to be included, but that has been removed from the project. So for the Lowertown Historic District, again, looking at the district as a whole, there is a continued finding of no adverse effects, but there are still two conditions. And again, this is the construction document. Because work is so close to the Samco building, we will be working to include details for the contractor to understand in the plan and specification, you know, that this is a significant historic property and measures to minimize harm to it. And then also that the shelter finishes, which we were kind of touching on a little bit there, that those are reviewed with consulting parties at the 90% design stage to make sure they meet the standards. So that'll be things like, what is that treatment? What is, you know, sort of the color of the angles, the type of glass, those kind of finish details. So we have another historic district here. This is the Urban Renewal Historic District, which is outlined here in purple. So very similar to Lowertown, we are looking here at the effects to the overall Urban Renewal Historic District. There's only one of the proposed stations actually located inside of the Urban Renewal District, and that's going to be at 5th and Cedar, but there are a couple that are just outside the boundaries of the district, like here at 5th and Robert, and here at 6th and Robert. So again, the original 30% finding was that, you know, there were these conditions placed on it. Sorry, before we talk about that, we're going to also look a little bit at the Manhattan Building, Pioneer Press, and Endicott. This is that 5th and Robert Street station. Here we have the Manhattan Building, even though it says Pioneer Endicott, and here wrapping around is the Pioneer Endicott Building. So again, we're using shelter type 1, which is the second smallest shelter type being proposed by the project. So this will be used at that 5th and Cedar Street, and that's within the Urban Renewal Historic District. and then also at these other stations, which are just immediately outside. So we've seen this before. It has that reduced tilt. Again, very, one of the smallest, most compact sort of floor plan. Here's just a detail from the 60% plan. Again, we're, getting some more information about, how that station will be constructed, which is what we were looking at. So for the Urban Renewal Historic District, we've continued to say no adverse effect. These are very small shelters within the Urban Renewal Historic District, which actually, it was during the time of the Urban Renewal Historic District that so many bus shelters were being introduced. So it's very sort of fitting with that time period. But we still are going to be looking at those shelter finishes just to make sure that they meet the Secretary of the Interior standards. We also, had to assess effects individually to the Manhattan building and the Endicott Arcade Edition. For this shelter here, we've, there's been an effort to keep as much of the shelter next to the Manhattan building, which is a much more substantial building. So having a shelter closer to that helps, because the Endicott Arcade is, 1 story, and just trying to keep as many of the elements pushed to the side from the Endicott Arcade as possible. So again, similar, we continue to say no adverse effect, but to review those construction documents, make sure the contractor knows that they are working adjacent to a historic property, and then to look at the shelter finishes. So then there are also stations proposed at Bryce Park and at Hams Plaza. So you see here, the Bryce Park Historic District was also no adverse effects with conditions based on 30%. And then the individual properties of the Ham Building, the Landmark Center, they had to also be taken into account. So here we see the outlines of those individual properties. Here we're using shelter type 2. The project will be using shelter type 2. So this is the smallest of all the shelters proposed. You can see it still has that reduced tilt on the back, and it's just, slightly smaller in size, again, to help minimize effects to any of the historic properties. It's, again, just a smaller footprint. For the Bryce Park, there's been a lot of discussion about, view sheds across the park to the Landmark Center, both for, the historic district and for the Landmark Center itself. So while work is occurring on this curb, which has been rebuilt numerous times, there's no, remaining historic fabric. There has been a lot of effort in keeping the view sheds from the park across to the Landmark Center very open. So the shelter has, is shifted slightly to the east so that those main views can continue. And again, by using the smallest shelter size and the transparency, that was all in an effort to minimize effects to the historic properties. Same thing with the Landmark Center, looking out from it, trying to keep those view sheds to the park. The proposed station will be sort of off to the side, which was an important characteristic. So again, there are changes in views or setting, but in order to rise to the level of being an adverse effect, everything was done to minimize and avoid those effects through the placement and the design. Here we see the Hams Plaza station. So this is going to be on the north side of the Landmark Center. You can see the proposed work. Here we have the Ham Building. So for all of these properties, again, we're not anticipating any physical effects, but there are some minor visual changes, but still, because we're in a dense urban area that has had bus shelters and all that, the finding was no adverse effect. But again, we want to look at those shelter finishes to ensure that continues. So those are the reviews of the properties. Any questions before I move into the next steps? So as I mentioned before, the 60% that we are consulting with you on today is out right now for consulting party review. So again, that would be a good chance to, by August 2nd anything that HPC wants to comment on or request. Would appreciate having those responses by August 2nd. We are currently in the process of reviewing the 90% plan, so we anticipate that between September and November that there will be some more information on those shelter finishes. We're going to continue to review to make sure there are no substantive changes, and then consultation on the remaining conditions would occur sometime likely in October. So with that, we're happy to take any questions or comments.
Are there any further questions from the commissioners for the applicant on this presentation?
This is Commissioner MacDonald.
Yes, Commissioner MacDonald.
Hello?
Yes, Commissioner MacDonald.
Oh, there we go. I applaud the applicant. I think their efforts to adjust size and location to preserve sightlines and minimalist architecture are to be applauded. I don't quite understand why any of them need to tilt back at all, but that's not my decision. But I also applaud Commissioner Nelson and Commissioner Bazat's comments regarding the historic nature of the location. I think it'd be very easy to screen a historic district map on one of the glass panels and a "you are here" sort of notation, which really isn't art. It's just sort of wayfinding and a bit of good propaganda for the historic district. But overall, I think I'm very pleased with what I see. I was afraid we might see some rabid historicism in the design, but I'm glad that didn't happen. I think the approach is well taken. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner MacDonald. And this is Commissioner Kimker, and I just have a comment along that line about the signage, the historic district information. I mean, it seems to me it could be something as simple as just a very small sign that says, "Did you know you were in a historic district?" And then say, find out more here by clicking, just having a barcode there that they could click on with their phone, and then it would take them up to a page that would give them more information about the district. Any other questions? Commissioner Bazat, did you have a question for the applicant? Or a comment? Commissioner Bazat?
Whoop. I was muted, strangely enough, for change. The commission is going to have a conversation about whether or not we're going to add comments about the historic, some sort of recognition of the Lowertown Historic District. I can wait for just our internal discussion on any comments, but I will echo Commissioner MacDonald's thanks. The considerations that the design group have made to particularly with the sightline transparency.
Any other questions for the applicant? I'm going to run through the role of the commissioners just to make sure we're not missing anybody here. Commissioner, let's see, I got the numbers here. Commissioner Bazat, do you have any questions?
I have nothing further until our internal discussion.
Oh. I'm sorry, Commissioner Bazat, your last comment was kind of broken up, and I didn't hear it.
Apologies. I have nothing further until our internal discussion.
Oh, okay, thank you. Commissioner MacDonald, anything further?
No further comment.
Thank you. Commissioner Nelson?
Just to say thank you to the presenters. It was all very clear, very easy to follow. So I think I understand. That's all.
Thank you. Commissioner Peroutka.
Madam Chair, for clarification, are we now at the time for comments, or is that going to come in a while?
Well, we can, I guess, I don't know, George, I'm a little bit confused on this. Do we actually have an internal deliberation on this after
Yes.
after we hear from the public?
Yes, so we'll take testimony if the public want to speak up, and then commissioners can just talk about comments that they want to give to the group, the team. Yeah.
Okay.
And any type of motion they may want to do.
Okay, thank you. So
Okay.
that's your Commissioner Peroutka.
Yes, thank you very much. I'll wait to hear from any public testimony and then offer what comments I might have. Thank you.
Thank you. So going once, any further questions for the applicant from the commissioners? If not, did staff receive any written testimony or comments?
We did not.
Thank you. So we'll now accept comments from the public who may be attending this meeting, and the following rules of procedure will be used. Speakers must state their name and address for the record before beginning their presentation. Each presentation must be confined to the topics of the hearing today, which is the CLG comments on the bus shelters, the bus rapid transit shelters. And each person may speak only once, and speakers will have up to 5 minutes to address the commission. So with that, are there any members of the public on this call who wish to speak to this application? Just to make sure that we are not missing anybody, I'm going to ask one more time whether there are any members of the public on the line who wish to comment or make questions on the presentation on the bus shelters, on the Goldline Bus Rapid Transit. Okay, hearing none, then we'll close the public hearing.
Hello?
Oh, sorry.
Hi, I'm a member of the public, and I have a really specific question.
Okay, you need to identify yourself, state your name and address first, please.
Sure, this is Rebecca Masterman, and I'm at 663 Conway Street, 55106. And I received a letter about a property I own at 657 Conway Street in regards to this meeting. And I've tried to figure out why specifically that one was pointed out via letter, and another property we own, 658 3rd Street, wasn't. So I couldn't find any new information. So if I could be told why we were on that letter, I would love it. Please.
Hey, Rebecca, this is Chelsea Johnson, environmental lead for Goldline. Actually, we just sent out some letters to certain properties where we need to do some wildlife habitat survey for the Fish and Wildlife Service. So that's what the letter is related to, not this process here today specific to the historic properties and assessment of effects.
So it must have been a mistake because it specifically said 65 Conway and then other historic properties. I thought it was strange, but must have been a mistake. I guess
it'd be helpful to see the letter. That's the only recent letter I can think that went out. So it should have been.
That one I got.
Yeah.
But this, I got a letter specifically for this meeting for our property on Conway, which is right adjacent to the station. But I didn't get the same letter for 658 3rd Street, which is also adjacent to the station. And I reread the materials and I couldn't find anything. So as long as you don't have anything that I need to know, then that's great.
This is George Gause, a staff with the City of St. Paul. That may have been from us. We send notice out within 100 feet of a boundary to all affected properties. It's just giving you notice that we're having the meeting and we're going to be discussing an issue that may have some effect to your property. So you can participate if you'd like.
Okay, I appreciate that. Usually when we get those, we get 3 because we have 3 properties really close to the Mounds Boulevard station. And so since we just got the 1, that's why I was concerned. So, but thank you everybody for clarifying.
We have a specific staff that handles notification, and there's a computer program that handles that through the tax assessor's office. So I'll check with them of why, maybe make sure there's not an error there, but.
Okay, well, it's all good. And like I said, the other properties weren't listed on the notice. It was just 657 Conway. But the one right behind on the alley that's the same proximity to the station, 658 3rd Street, was not listed. So if it was a mistake, I think that might make more sense. But thank you. I don't want to take any more of your time.
Chair, this is a comment for George Gauze. George?
Yep, I'm here.
Yeah, that address is listed on the agenda as one of the potentially affected properties, so that's probably why she received the letter.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and they go off of 100 feet of some of those. So we tried to pick a address that was closest to the station platform. Go from there because a lot of these are in public right of ways. They don't have addresses. So.
Chair? You are muted. So
All right, I apologize. Yes. Are there any other members of the public who wish to address the commissioner? So I'll just put that out there one more time, just to make sure we're not missing anybody. Are there any other members of the public that wish to address this application, this presentation? And if there is no further testimony, then we'll close the public hearing and open it up for, well, I guess we'll have a motion first. And Commissioner Bazat, do you have a motion you'd like to make?
I do. I move that the HPC concurs with the assessment of no adverse effect for the updated conditions for the Gold Line BRT proposed shelter/platform designs, and that the HPC will forward a list of comments and suggestions expressed during the deliberation and public comment period of the meeting. We encourage the design group to consider options for recognition that the Gold Line shelters acknowledge the surrounding Lowertown Historic District in some fashion, period. We delegate City of St. Paul HP staff the ability to comment on any minor issues that may arise with the project.
Thank you, Commissioner Bazat. Do I have a second for the motion?
This is Nelson. I second.
Thank you. And then I'll open up for discussion on that motion. Commissioner Peroka, did you have comments?
Yes, I just am wondering if Commissioner Bazat would alter her resolution to say historic sites, because the HPC also can touch on Ham Plaza as well as Rice Park, and as well as the
and
other.
Pioneer, indeed,
Okay.
and Pioneer Endicott. I absolutely concur with the amendment.
Yeah, and the urban
Renewal District as well.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you.
And I renew my second. This is Nelson.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so any further discussion on that amended motion from the commissioners?
Well, this is Nelson. I just want to say that Commissioner McDonald's suggestion of a screened map, I think, is excellent. Really sounds perfect for these locations. And also the Commissioner Kimker's idea of having the cell phone link, also excellent. So I hope that maybe when these comments are forwarded to the right people, those specifics are mentioned. That's all.
Thank you, Commissioner Nelson. Commissioner Proken, did you have something to add?
Yeah, just regarding Commissioner Nelson's comments and the comments as a whole about some type of plaque or place setting that states that it is a historic district that the bus stop is a good idea, and it's good to have it included in the comments. I'm all in favor of it. This is something I think might be an opportunity for us to, the HPC, to work with local partners like the St. Paul Parks Conservancy, which had a big part in redoing Rice Park and having plaques placed in Rice Park, as well as refurbishing the existing historic markers. And that Ham Plaza, which will also, there are ideas to come up with something new to rework Ham Plaza. There is a plaque now stating the importance of Ham Plaza, the donation from the Ham family, to the city of St. Paul, and maybe that placard can be preserved and placed in the new bus stop, and that would go for any other existing plaques at bus stops that the Gold Line would be on. But that might be an opportunity to work with local groups connected with St. Paul specifically. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Peroka. Commissioner Bazat, did you have further comments? No.
Yep, yet again, muted. I'd really like to encourage the idea of the semi-transparent screening on the bus shelter itself of the map of the district, and would ask if HPC staff work with whomever may be the ones to actually put that into happening in terms of, font, and particularly in Lower Town. I know that there are signage standards because we've dealt with them for other, for businesses that have proposed new signage in the area, so that any of these maps would be consistent with the district signage requirements, and perhaps each of the stops could include a separate image of the specific sites, which folks waiting at the shelter are staring at as they wait. So a plaque, I think I think two separate issues, Prodka. I think being part of the shelter is important, and the idea of the semi-transparent screening one of the shelter ends would be a way to maintain that transparency that's been designed into the shelters, yet accomplish the purpose that we would like to see, calling attention to a district or an historic site.
Thank you, Commissioner Bazat. Commissioner Peroka, did you have further comments?
No, I didn't. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion on the motion? Let me just run through the roll just to make sure I'm not missing anybody here. Commissioner Bazat, any further comments?
No.
Thank you. Commissioner McDonald.
My only comment is that we request some sort of acknowledgement of the historic district, but the means and methods, I think, should be left to the designers and let them do their job. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Nelson, anything further?
Nothing more.
Thank you. Commissioner Kuroka.
Just one more clarification. So we're voting on the resolution and then we're going to have discussion, correct?
No,
Or
we're having
comments.
discussion, then we're going to vote on the resolution.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
We're having the discussion now because we've already made the motion, and then after we complete the discussion, we'll vote on the motion.
We'll vote on the motion and then we'll have comments, correct? Or is this the time for comments?
Well,
on the
I'm
applicant?
not sure. What would the comments be on after the motion?
The comments on the presentation we just had.
Well, the way I understand it, Commissioner Kuroka, is that the staff is taking notes of this meeting, and they will consolidate those. Correct me if I'm wrong here, George, but and then they will consolidate those and forward them to the consulting part, or to the team, the design team.
That's correct.
Okay.
So this is the time for comments. Add any comments do you want? Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification. I will take time to make a few comments. I like the simplicity and unity of design for the shelters. I think many of the buildings in the historic district speak for themselves. So having a soft footprint and an unobscured view is a good idea. So I will compliment the comments of Commissioner McDonald regarding the slight design. That's not overwhelming. There are plenty of examples in the Twin Cities of bus shelters that are in amazing areas, but they function as a distraction and an interruption, where this design, the unity, can bring unity to a varied urban landscape that does go from St. Paul to Woodbury and from Woodbury to St. Paul. As well, this is a welcome investment in downtown St. Paul, particularly, that has not received serious attention for quite a while. And the bus shelters at Rice Park and Ham Plaza specifically will really add to what will be happening at Ham Plaza. That area with the bike paths coming on board, coming online pretty soon, as well as the streets being fixed and the sidewalks being redone. So this is really a welcome. The Gold Line is a very welcome and appreciated investment in St. Paul, and it's very sensitive to the historic structures and landscapes that it will be traveling along. So thank you, and those are my comments.
Thank you, Commissioner Kuroka. Any further comments, suggestions, or discussion on the pending motion? If not, I'll close the deliberation then on this motion and call for the vote. So on the amended motion, Commissioner Bazat, what do you vote?
Aye. I vote in favor.
Thank you. Commissioner McDonald?
Yes.
Commissioner Nelson?
Yes.
Commissioner Kuroka?
Yes.
Thank you. And I would vote yes too if that vote is needed. So the motion passes. Thank you very much. And if there's no other business for the commission today, I will call for a motion for adjournment.
This is Nelson, so moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Nelson. And a second on that?
This is Commissioner Bazat. I second the motion.
Thank you. Any opposition to the motion to adjourn? Hearing none, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.